By becoming lover of God, you become eternally happy. That is Krishna consciousness.
Can I see a show of hands? How many of you are here for the first time? And are you excited? Yeah? Okay. So today we're going to talk a little bit about our way of thinking, our religion. We're going to talk a little bit about worldviews and things like that. But before we get into all these details, then, like I've been living here as a monk for 10 years. And one of the things that we learn in the temple, we learn how to read thoughts. So I can see by your faces that some of you are thinking right now, you've been a monk for 10 years? That sounds completely crazy. Why did you become a monk? What happened? What went wrong? So before we get too much into the religion and the philosophy, I was thinking I'd just make myself a little bit relatable. So I would like to share with you the story of how I became a monk. So most of you are like 11, 12 years old? Okay. So when I was 12 years old, my dear grandmother, she invited me and some of my cousins to cruise down the Nile in Egypt. And that was so cool. Little Jacob, 12 years old, was adventuring in Egypt and seeing all kinds of cool things, like the pyramids, and like there was like deserts and all kinds of like interesting things like palm trees and like old temples. And I remember one moment I was standing in the ruins of an ancient Egyptian temple. And just imagine that there are like, hieroglyphs? So there were hieroglyphs carved on the walls, and there were statues in white stone and old dusty vases. And as little Jacob, he was standing at the feet of a statue of a majestic pharaoh. And I was just dreaming myself away, imagining what must it have been like to be a pharaoh or to be a prince of Egypt. And while I was daydreaming, then a tour guide walks up on my side and declares that Ramses II, have you heard about Ramses? So it says Ramses II has been dead for 3,200 years. And I remember thinking to myself, that is a long time to have been dead. You probably have this experience. Have you sometimes had like a late class in the afternoon? And it seems that just that 45 minutes seems to drag on for a millennia. Yes. Yeah, you had that experience? Okay, so imagine, I was thinking to myself, imagine to be dead for 3,200 years. That must really be boring. That must really be, monotonous. You know that word? Monotonous, that means that something's just like, it's just the same thing, like no variety, nothing happening. So I remember thinking to myself, how boring that must be to just, I wonder what it must feel like to be dead. Does it feel like anything? Do you even have an experience? Or do you just stop experiencing altogether? What happens to me when I die? Can any one of you relate to this kind of thinking? Have any one of you been like struggling a little bit with these big existential questions? Yeah. What's the purpose of my life? What happens when I die? Is there a God? Can I see a show of hands? How many have been thinking about these things? So I remember when these thoughts, they came to my mind, what did I do? I asked my parents. And I said, Mom, Dad, who am I and what happens when I die? And what is the meaning of my life? And my father, he was supposed to be like a smart guy. He was like professor in the university. And he said, son, I don't know. So I was like, okay, let's try next in line. So I tried my grandparents. And they also didn't know. And then I thought to myself, my God, the adults, they're just pretending that they have it all figured out. They're just pretending. They're playing so smart, grown up, you know, with their driver's license, full-time job, right to vote, all these things, right? Seemingly they got it all figured out. But if you ask them, like, what's the purpose of life and what happens when you die, most of them, they're like completely blank. So I got a little bit frustrated. I was thinking, I'm supposed to follow these people and what they say. They tell me to go to school, get good grades, so I can have a good education, get a good job, get a good house, get a nice wife, maybe get a loan and a car and like a few kids and stuff like that. And what? Eventually, you get old and then you die. And then what was the whole point? So I remember thinking to myself, this is a very frustrating experience. I don't know what happens when I die. So if I don't know where I'm going, how can I know if I'm making the right choice? Is it really worth investing all of my time and my energy into just like doing what the grown-ups they say and getting a good education? If they cannot answer my basic questions. So anyway, I remember time goes, whether you like it or not, time goes. And after finishing school, I started in high school. And when I was at the end of that, when I was just about to finish high school, then I remember thinking to myself, my God, now I am almost one of them. Now I'm almost grown up myself. And now I have to choose a path in life. I have to choose a career and a job. But the same questions, they remained. I don't know. I don't know what happens when I die. And I remember, like, especially when I was a child, this was something that was very, very difficult for me. Sometimes I would just lie awake for like several hours in the night and just think and think and think. Like, what's the purpose of the whole thing? So I see some of you nodding. You can relate to this. It's very good. That's a sign of intelligence. Yeah, we have some natural philosophers amongst us here today. So you know what I did after I finished high school? Then I thought to myself, I'm not ready to start university or like take some prolonged education. So I thought I'll buy myself a little bit of time. So I went to do my military service for 4 months. And for me personally, that was very good. Because I think most of you, I think I can see in your eyes, you're quite intelligent. You're like sharp students, right? Most of you are getting pretty good grades, I assume. When I was in school, I was a little bit of a slacker. You know, I did everything with my left hand. And so, but I thought to myself, let me buy a little bit of time. So I went to the military, and in that period in my life, that was actually really good for me because I got a lot of self-discipline. You have to develop some kind of discipline when you're in the military. So you're not forced to develop discipline in the same way when you're in school. So, and I noticed that when I was like trying to cultivate like good habits and things like that, I started getting up early in the morning, starting caring more about my health. I started, many of my bad habits, like for example, I was maybe playing a little bit too much video games and things like that. Anyone plays a little too much video games? Yeah? So I stopped doing that and I started using my time a little more wisely, you can say. And so one of the things that I did, I became like vegetarian, I started like exercising and like, but one of the things that made a huge difference in my personal life is that I started reading books. Any one of you who like to read? Hands up. Sure. Whoa! Hope for the future. Nice. Good to see. Sometimes, please keep that going. Please keep your curiosity wide awake. And never allow it to dwindle. Keep on learning and learning and learning, because so many people, young people nowadays, they're just so preoccupied with like computer games and watching YouTube and television and these things. They're just like making you so dull, making you so like slow and stupid. But reading a book is something that really like, it forces you to think. It forces you to actually use your brain and your imagination. And it opens up your horizon to so many new thoughts and ideas. So you know, I did a crazy experiment. I thought to myself, what will happen to me in 1 year if I read one book a week? And I thought, what does it take to read one book a week? And I found out, well, if you take a book, average book, 250 pages, something like that, right? You divide it by 7, then you get 30-something. And how long does it take to read approximately 30 pages? It differs from individual to individual, of course. But for me, it was a little more than 1 hour. So I was thinking, if I take 1 hour to read every day, I will have read one book a week, 54 books in 1 year. And I was thinking, my God, I'll be so smart at the end of this year. So I undertook this experiment, and this is something that, for me, it opened up so many new ideas and so many new thoughts. And one of them, I got very interested in Eastern philosophy. Have any one of you read some Eastern philosophy? Anyone who knows something about meditation? Show of hands. Yeah? Okay. And yoga? Yeah? What if we use a fancy word like philosophy? Anyone interested in philosophy? You know what philosophy means? Actually, you know, there's anyone in here who's called Sophia? Do we have a Sophia in the room? Okay, it's a common name. Sophia is actually Greek and means the goddess of wisdom. And philo, that means love. So a philosopher is someone who loves the goddess of wisdom. So philosophy, that basically means that. That means love of wisdom. It's one of my favorite words. So anyway, I started getting into Eastern philosophy. And that was, for me, very, very fascinating. And we'll get more into that, like the thoughts about the mind and the spirit and all these kind of things. So I got into Eastern philosophy, and when I came home from the military, then I was kind of back to square one. I still didn't really know what to do. Like, should I take an education? Should I go and travel? Should I do this? Should I do that? And I was living here in Copenhagen. And then one day, I was walking down the shopping street of Copenhagen. And then in the middle of the whole thing, you know the shopping street of Copenhagen. And you know how busy people they are? They're like coming and going, and they're drinking their cafe latte, and they carrying their briefcases, and like shopping and talking on the phone, and this and that. And then in the middle of this whole stressful scenario, there is a monk standing in the middle of the shopping street. And I just remember thinking to myself, that is completely out of place. What is he doing here? It's kind of like, imagine that you're on the beach and all of a sudden there's a penguin. It's just like, buddy, you're in the wrong place. So he looked like someone who just came down from the Himalayan mountains and like all like dressed up in like strange clothes and with a little bit of clay on his forehead. And I remember thinking to myself, who is this guy? And I was kind of like curious by nature, so I went up to him and I asked, like, who are you? And what's up? Why are you looking like this? And so we fell into a conversation, and he started explaining to me a little about his life. And Now he was an elderly gentleman with a little bit of gray hair. So I assume he was like in the beginning of his 60s or something like that. So I asked, for how long have you been a monk? And he said, I started when I was 18. And I remember thinking to myself, my God, that's a long time. It's a long time to have been a monk. You must really have had some experience with this. Like you must really have found something that you like, because otherwise you must have grown tired and then you would have done something differently, right? So he said, very, very interestingly, because we talked a little about, he asked about myself also and what I was doing, and I shared this, that actually I don't really know where I'm heading. I just finished the military. I don't know if I should go for more education or if I should go travel. And then he said one thing to me, and this is very, very, very intelligent advice. So kindly you note this. Pay close attention, write a mental note, because I assume that all of you would like to be happy, isn't it? Show of hands, who would like to be happy? Do you know what's the most important factor for our happiness in life? Is it our income? The money in the bank? No. Is it the career? Is it the house? Is it the weather? Is it the governmental election? Is it what's for dinner tonight? Yeah? So, actually, this monk, he said to me, he said, young man, the most important determining factor for your quality in life is not so much the circumstance, but it is your consciousness. Let's take that one more time, just to make sure that it sticks. The most important factor for your quality in life is not so much the circumstance, but it is your consciousness. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's about your thoughts and it's about your emotions. It's about what you experience. And then he handed me the Bhagavad-Gita. Does any one of you, have you heard about the Bhagavad-Gita? Parts of you are reading the Bhagavad-Gita, and there's a few people in the room. So actually, this book is 5,000 years old. That's quite an old book. And then you may think, well, then I suppose it's a little bit outdated, isn't it? But you would be fascinated to know, you know Albert Einstein? Yeah. They say that he was quite a smart person, right? So Albert Einstein, he says, when I read the Bhagavad-Gita, everything else seemed completely superfluous. You know Nelson Mandela? He's also quite cool, right? Yeah. So Nelson Mandela, he learned the Bhagavad-Gita by heart. When he was in the jail in apartheid, he was one of his inmates, one of the people he was imprisoned with. He was actually an Indian lawyer who knew the Bhagavad-Gita. So they spent a lot of time just talking about philosophy while they were there together. Do you know Mahatma Gandhi? Yes. He's also kind of one of the boys, right? So Mahatma Gandhi, he once said, when doubts, they stare me in the face, and I see not one ray of hope on the horizon, he say, I turn towards the pages of the Bhagavad-Gita. I find one verse here and one verse there, and suddenly I start to smile and laugh in the midst of overwhelming sorrows. So a lot of smart people, they read the Bhagavad-Gita and they found tremendous wisdom in this great literature. And so, I would like to just test you out a little bit, because it's still like early in the morning, so just to see how smart are you actually. Are you ready for a thought experiment? Yes. Some you're not ready, and some they are ready. But they say fools, they rush in where angels don't dare. So actually, maybe you're a little bit wise to say, no, I'm not ready for a thought experiment. Because this might actually be a little bit of a point of no return experience for some of you. So are you sure that you're ready for a thought experiment? Yes. Okay, let's do this. Okay, now everyone try pointing towards your left foot. Not your knee, your foot. Okay, and then think for a moment, do we say my foot or I foot?
My foot.
My foot. My head or I head?
My head.
My body or I body?
My body.
My phone or iPhone?
iPhone.
Ah, that was a trick question. No, it's not iPhone, it's my phone. It's not my body, or it's not I body, it is my body. We talk about the body, think about it, when we talk about the body, we talk about a possession. We talk about something that we have. So then the question is, who has the body? Now, now try pointing towards your knee.
Which knee?
Just one of them. Try pointing towards your forehead. Try pointing towards yourself. Isn't it interesting how most of us, we point here? Why do we point towards the center of the heart?
It's kind of where the soul is.
It's kind of where the soul is. You sound like someone who read the Bhagavad-Gita. Because Krishna, he says, in the Bhagavad-Gita, he says, Haritisha Arjuna Tistati. He says, the soul is sitting in the heart. Now think about this for a moment. We all have 5 senses, right? You can see, you can hear, you can smell, you can taste, and you can touch. And then some of you might have a 6th sense. Anyone has a 6th sense? Yeah? Very nice. The fortunate few. But most of us, we have 5. But think about it for a moment. What's actually happening when we are having sensory experiences? When, for example, when I am seeing, is it the eye that is seeing, or is it me who is seeing through the eye? Is it the tongue that is tasting the good food? Or is it me who is tasting with the tongue? Is it the ear that is hearing? Or is it me that is hearing with the ear? And now I can see by the look on your faces that some of you are like doing some intense thinking. But is it the brain that is thinking? Or is it me thinking with the brain?
It's the brain.
It's the brain? Are you sure?
Yes, because the brain is the one that's tasting through the tongue.
Oh.
And it's also the one...
Let's take that one in our questions and answer session, because I have some very, very interesting neurological research that I'd like to share with you in that case. But anyway, so intuitively we see that I am different from this body. We talk about the body as something that we have, and when we talk about our experience, for example the seeing, then we all agree that it's me seeing with the eye. So who is actually the person? Who are you? So Krishna, he says something amazing in the Bhagavad-Gita, and I remember first time I read this, it completely blew me away. He says, Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yovanam jara tata dehantara prapti adiras tatara namuyati. Very nice. So Krishna, he says that the body is constantly changing, but the soul is on a journey. The soul is just moving through. So what is actually the soul? That is one of the subject matters that's described in the Bhagavad-Gita. And Krishna, he's talking about what happens when you die. And you remember that was one of the questions that personally I was struggling with as a child. And he says something quite interesting. he says, Yam yam vapismaram bhavam chayatyante kalevaram tam tam mevaiti kaunteya saratat bhava bhavitaha. Krishna, he says, that consciousness that you have at the moment of death, that will determine your next birth. So he says, if you are not this body, but if you're the soul, what happens when you die? Well, you don't die. The body dies, but the soul is eternal. And so what happens when the body dies? The soul gets another body. And so he says, it depends on your thoughts. It depends on your consciousness. So for example, any one of you, you know the kind of person who just loves to sleep? Yeah? So imagine that's your favorite hours of the day. That is from falling asleep until waking up. That's the best part in life. We got a few. So imagine how nice it would be to, for example, be a bear. To be a grizzly bear. You can go, when winter comes, then you can just go into this state of hibernation. You can just go to sleep for 4 months straight. Amazing, right? And you have a built-in sleeping bag. So cozy and comfortable, right? Do you know the kind of person who is living to eat? Yeah, we have a few. Eat and sleep. Okay, good. It's a good combination. First eat, then sleep. Yeah. But hey, imagine how nice it must be to then be a cow. Did you know that the cow, it has 4 stomachs? How cool is that, right? So when one stomach is full, then you can just rotate and start working with the next one.
It just sounds like you're a machine.
So like that. Anyone who likes sweets? You know? Well, what's it called in English? We call it a colibri in Danish. This little hummingbird, yeah. Did you know that the hummingbird, it eats its own weight in sugar 6 times a day? Yeah, it's like doing all that humming, it's burning quite a lot of calories. So it has to like eat a lot of sugar in order to make up for that. No, but just the point that I'm making here is that there are so many different kind of bodies. And there are so many different states of consciousness. And so Krishna, he says that you get a body according to your state of consciousness at the time of death. Now, you have free will, and you can choose to lift your consciousness, or you can lower your consciousness. You know, for example, in Denmark, then for example, drinking alcohol is very popular amongst young people and grown-ups. Did you know that? So what is that doing? Is that elevating your consciousness, or is it lowering your consciousness? Lowering. Okay. So for example, sitting and playing video games the whole day. Elevating or lowering, yeah? So, okay, so if you would like to elevate your consciousness, what could you do practically today? Read? What do you read? Donald Duck?
Very thick books.
Thick books, but they have to be good also. Like
Good books.
thoughtful.
Play outdoor sports.
Playing outdoor sports, or also just like having experiences and things like that. This is also something that's generating a good consciousness. Yes. Huh? Eat. Is that lifting your consciousness?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's different things that we could do. For example, as children, when you're going to school, when you spend a few hours with your teachers, then hopefully you will have learned something, right? Because they have more experience than you have. So anyway, so there's different things that we can do in order to elevate our consciousness. We can read, we can meditate, we can be with people who are smarter than ourselves, we can ask questions. There's so many things we can do, and we can also lower our consciousness. And so it's just interesting that Krishna, he says that you will have to make this choice. You cannot just remain where you are. You either have to go higher or lower. So to make a conscious choice. So in the Bhagavad-Gita, and actually that's one of the things that this monk, he told me. He says that your life's quality is dependent on your consciousness. And he says this book has so many amazing ideas for how to practically elevate your consciousness. So anyway, I remember I got this book from the monk and I thought, wow, this is really fascinating. And I took it back home and I started reading it, and it completely blew me away. It was just so fascinating. So many new ideas and thoughts, and especially this about the soul and reincarnation. It was really interesting to me. So I thought I'd like to learn something more. So I found out that there is actually a temple in Copenhagen. Did you know that?
Yeah.
You're sitting here right now. So I remember 10 years ago I came to the temple for the first time, and when I walked in through these doors, there was like a lot of people sitting on the floor doing a meditation. After the meditation, they were singing mantras, and we'll get back to that a little bit later. But they were singing mantras, and then afterwards there was a lecture, and there was a monk, and he was explaining all kinds of interesting things. He was talking about the soul, and he was talking about how to realize the soul. He was talking about how to be happy and what's the purpose of life and things like that. And then they served out, one of the best meals that I've had in my life. And children, you are in for a treat, because Patrick has arranged that you'll all be having your lunch here a little later. So, but no, one of the things that then happened is that after they had served out this whole like amazing meal, I can see some of you starting to get a little bit hungry. Just wait for it. It's going to be so good. You won't believe. Maybe some of you will even maybe want to move into the temple and think, yeah, okay, this is the good life right here. So, but after this whole Sunday feast, then one of the monks, he announced, hey, thank you very much. It was very nice that you could all come and spend the day with us. If anyone, they would like to learn something more, if anyone have questions, then you're welcome to, we have a room in the other building. You can go sit down, ask questions. And I thought to myself, I would like to ask questions. I have so many questions. And I ended up sitting with a monk for 2 hours, just asking questions. And I found for the first time in my life that I was dealing with a person, for every question that I asked, he had a very, very good answer. So just in a few moments then, I will allow you to start asking questions. And I'm not saying that I have all the answers, but if you have all the questions, then we can find out. But this monk, I remember talking to him. And so many of the things that he said, it made a lot of sense. Like, I like this idea about the soul. I like this about like elevating your consciousness, working with your thoughts and your emotions, and like. But some of the things that he said, it seemed a little bit strange. It was a little bit of a new concept to me. So I would like to ask you the question: how many of you believe in God? Okay, that's quite a majority, quite a handful. And how many of you would say that you are a little bit skeptical? Maybe, maybe not? Okay. And anyone who completely disbelieves in God? Anyone who's an atheist? Okay. And don't worry, it's not that we're going to condemn or crucify anyone. But just to get an idea of where you're all at. Because actually the first time that I came in this temple 10 years ago, believe it or not, the religious fanatic right here actually used to be an atheist. And when the monk, he started talking about God, then I was like, hey, okay, soul, I'm down with it. It makes sense. Reincarnation, meditation, okay, cool. But when you're talking about God, it's not really resonating with me. But then he explained the existence of God in a way that made so much sense to me. Would you like to hear a very good argument for the existence of God?
Yes.
So he said to me, he was a little bit provocative. He said, Well, it can be very difficult to understand God because God, He is very big and you are working with something very small. So he says, if you're trying to understand that which is very big through that which is very small, it's not really compatible. It's kind of like you're trying to measure the moisture in the air with a measuring tape. Can you do that? No. Can you measure the moisture in the air with a measuring tape? No. So can you understand the unlimited existence of God with your limited intelligence? No. No, you cannot. But instead of trying to understand the unlimited existence of God, instead of trying to understand that whole, you can try to understand the part. That makes it much easier. Let me give you an example. The monk, he said, very, very interestingly, he said, if you were to take a ray of the sun and you find out that the sun ray, it is warm and it's giving light, what does that indicate about the nature of the sun? That the sun must be?
Warm and bright.
Warm and bright. Would it make sense that the sun ray is warm and bright, but the sun is dark and cold? No, that would be strange. What about, let's say you take a drop of water, and that so happens to be wet. What does that indicate about the nature of the ocean? That the ocean must be? Wet. Yeah, it would be strange if it was very dry. So then he said, are you not a part of something greater? Are you? Are we all part of something greater? Are we part of a greater existence? Are you part of the universe? Yeah. No? You're not part of the universe? Okay, then please go outside the universe. Then we don't want you in here. So, no, just kidding. Oh. So, if you can understand the whole by understanding the part, then you can actually understand the nature of the total reality by just contemplating your own existence. So think for a moment, are you a living being? Yes. Everyone's a living being? Yes. And do you experience thoughts and emotions? Yes. And can you have do you have dreams and desires? Yes. And you can experience relationships? And you can move through this world and you can have memories and things like that. And yeah, you can connect to other living beings and you can experience love and yeah.
Yes.
So isn't it amazing to think about our existence? Sometimes we take it a little bit for granted, but isn't it cool to be a living being?
Kind of.
Do we appreciate being living beings?
Yes.
Or would it be better to not be a living being? Who would prefer being a non-living being? I think you must be joking. So we appreciate being alive. So then this monk, he said one interesting thing. He says, so if this sun ray, it is so warm and so bright, how then could the sun be so dark and so cold? If this drop of water is so wet, how then could the ocean be so dry as to not even exist? So when he explained to me that, I was actually a little bit annoyed because I couldn't really argue with it. I was like, damn, that's so bulletproof. How do I deal with this? Right? It's like, it must be. How, as part of a total existence, how can my experience of life be so rich and variegated? And how could the experience of the sum total of everything just be plain dead? It doesn't make any sense. So I remember leaving from the temple that evening, And I just had a complete like change of mind. This was like, he just opened my horizon in a way that I had never imagined. So I started coming again. I started coming every Sunday because I was thinking, wow, these people here at the temple, there's really something to learn. And I started reading the books, and I found that the culture was so nice, the people were very sweet, loving, affectionate, food was great, philosophy was interesting. And after some time, then I thought to myself, hey, I got so much benefit from staying 4 months in the military. How about staying 4 months in the temple? Instead of doing some military service, how about doing a little bit of temple service? So then I ended up asking one of the monks, could I maybe move in with you guys and just like check it out and like see like what your lifestyle is like? And so I did that. And then I forgot to move out again. And now I've been here for 10 years. And I'm quite happy about it. It's a really nice way of life. So yeah, we got a little bit into our philosophy. We talked a little bit about the difference between the body and the soul. And then we talked a little about the existence of God. And then I would just like to end on this point, because one of my questions was, what is the meaning of life? Anyone has been wondering what's the meaning of life? Show of hands. Would you like to know? Yes. Yeah? So, does it make sense, this argument of the existence of God? Does it make sense? Yes. So we can all like rationally accept that there is a God who created us? So if you were created by God, then why? Why did God create you? What was His purpose? What was His intention? Why does God need you? So Krishna, in the Bhagavad-Gita, he is very nicely explaining how that He created each and every soul with a very specific purpose. What is this purpose? Just as parents, they get children, sometimes they get them accidentally, but in an ideal world, then parents, they would get children so that they would have someone to care for, someone that they could love, and someone who would love them in return. So God, He's not like modern day parents. He doesn't get children accidentally. He gets children intentionally. And so when God, He created us so that He would have someone to love. And so someone could love Him in return. Isn't that beautiful? So that's actually, from the point of view of the Bhagavad-Gita, that is actually the purpose of life. The purpose of your life is to give and receive love in a relationship with God, which includes the relationship with all the souls, with all your spiritual brothers and sisters. Isn't that nice? So, thank you so much for your kind intention. And I mentioned that one of my positive experience was that I got the opportunity to ask questions from the monk. And he could answer each and every single one of my questions very nicely. So now I would like to be able to give you that same opportunity.